these are available. This is what's going on. And yeah, this is the way to go right now. One of my favorite things on here. I had to add that on there. You read the label, you gotta do it.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're gonna be checking out Chris Bumstead's new pre-workout drop. He posted a physique update, CBum, raw protein, and pre-workout is live. And he gives a little summation here of the pre-workout, what you can expect from it, future plans, and we will be getting into the formula soon and dismantling it. So let's hear what he has to say about the description, you know, the benefits, or just, I don't know, his, any sort of claims about the product and attributes that are notable.
This is something we threw together really quick because obviously when I was with Jack Factory, we came over and we worked together with them to keep it like similar products, stuff going, and we wanted to have something come out really quick for the Olympia so that you guys could have products coming out while I'm a week out. I could use it while I'm in the prep and all this kind of stuff. So we have something really big in the works with Raw coming up after this. We're going to be reformulating, kind of playing with the labels a little bit and just having a little more fun with it.
Okay, so this isn't even apparently the long, like what the formula is going to be. This is thrown together last minute sort of thing. So this is not representative of what will ultimately be his pre-workout, I guess, but we'll go into it anyways because this is highly requested.
Anything's tweaking it, but the same products that I had with Jack Factory will be available through them in probably mid-October or late November. Their unfinished series, I'll talk to you guys more about that, so you guys can still get that product as well. But for now, these are available. This is what's going on, and yeah, this is the fucking way to go right now. One of my favorite things on here.
This is the fucking way to go right now.
I had to add that on there.
Don't be a pussy, take 2 scoops.
You read the label, you gotta do it, follow it. Not gonna lie, the rocket candy flavor so far has been my favorite, but the blackberry lemonade is probably just because I had that for a while. My mind's really not working right now. 6 days out of the Olympia, I'm trying to think of what I'm gonna say. But be sure to grab these products. You can use code CBUM. I'm gonna have a link in the bio, I'm gonna have a link in the comments.
Tan's on point, bro. You got some Milano tan in there or what?
Everywhere you can imagine there's gonna be links. They're available now and they won't be available for a very long time. So make sure you...
All right, so let's go look at the website. Doesn't sound like there is a whole lot more in the breakdown.
And yeah. I completely lost my train of thought.
Okay, so I guess that's, you know, I don't blame him for not wanting to dig into too much elaborate detail. Like, he is 6 days out, he said. Like, he's probably fucking brain dead and running on fumes. So, like, I think he said he was eating like 1,600 calories or something recently. Like, fuck me. Plus the 2 hours of cardio he was doing, plus training. Can't even imagine, bro. So anyways, getting into the product. This is the CBum series Savage pre-workout. $49.99 with 40 servings. It is not your run-of-the-mill pre-workout. It was designed by Savages for Savages to take your performance to the next level. Our formula has been engineered with some of the market's best and most trusted ingredients like glycersize. This is also known as glycer pump, by the way. So this is the 65% standardized non-clumping glycerol that we all know and love. Huperazine A, an acetylcholinistrace inhibitor, alpha GPC, the most highly versatile choline donor in my opinion, synephrine, an alpha-1 adrenergic receptor agonist, I believe, and L-Tyrosine, a neurotransmitter precursor. These ingredients aid in improved cellular hydration, mental focus and energy, blood flow, and fat burning. Chris Bumstead personally designed Savage pre-workout's flavoring system to create a top-of-the-line product with industry-leading taste profiles. Fucking flavor systems, bro. Dosage recommendation. Assess tolerance. Start with 1 scoop. Half. Can't even fucking talk now. Half Savage if needed. Work your way up to 2 scoops. Full Savage. Our serving size is based on 1 scoop. Okay, so like pretty standard practice. Break the label up into 2 scoops. I can't zoom in too much, so hopefully you guys can read this shit. Let's see if there's anything else down at the bottom. Ingredients. Glycer size, glycer pump, breaking down what you can expect from them. So presumably these are the primary ingredients, which would include the glycer pump, citrulline, like these are their main marketing angles, I guess. Betaine anhydrous, L-Tyrosine, alpha-GPC, huperzine A. Obviously, I'm pretty familiar with these ingredients. So here we have the supplement facts. Hopefully you guys can read that because I'm just realizing I can't zoom in to really, let me see if I can open a new tab. Oh, boom, there we fucking go, buddy. Savage pre-workout, full-blown sharpness, full screen. All right, so we have, this is for all intents and purposes, the 2 scoop dosage being the full formula. So we're at 20 servings per container, 2 scoops is the full formula. So we have L-Citrulline, not inflated with malic acid. As you can see, they rightfully put it in their other ingredients section. However, obviously if you had enough that would, quantify being a potential active, you could put it in here, which is what I think makes the most sense if malic acid had any performance enhancing ergogenic properties at all. But there really is no evidence to really reinforce that it does. So ultimately, as long as it's not artificially inflating the citrulline content on the label, that's fucking A-okay with me. NO precursor at 6,000 milligrams. Again, some people might think this is the bare minimum efficacious dose, but that is with citrulline malate 2-to-1. So in reality, 4,000 milligrams is the bare minimum efficacious dose of L-citrulline. So 6,000 milligrams, pretty fucking solid, dude. Okay, next up on the list, we have beta-alanine, the infamous prolapsed butthole itch ingredient that we all know and love. It is featured at 3,200 milligrams. I have quite the history with this ingredient. You guys kind of know my stance on it already. It's not bad. It's a good ingredient. Like in an acute force production context, is it going to actually equate to any significant, ergogenic properties that are worthwhile in a a bodybuilding context, or is it more going to be useful in a muscular endurance standpoint for things that are exceeding, 60 seconds of effort? Like ultimately, where it really shines is in exercises and sports endeavors that are exceeding, they're 1 minute upwards of, 4 minutes in duration, I believe, was the kind of classified range of its, where it kind of shines. And again, you would have to build up to approximately 179,000 milligrams to really realize the full performance enhancing properties of this ingredient. So just because, you have beta-alanine in there, doesn't mean you're actually going to get any of those effects until you build up to a pretty reasonable saturation, which ultimately in the literature is shown to be 179,000 milligrams, which is a fuck ton, which requires a prerequisite of about 6,400 milligrams of intake per day to actually reach that point with no breaks. However, does that mean you can't get there or get a fraction of that with, 3,200 milligrams on an acute time? Like for example, with this, obviously if it has stimulants in it, you're probably not going to take this product on a daily basis. You're going to be taking it actually as a pre-workout, 4 or 5 times a week, maybe at most, in which case you are getting 3,200 milligrams, which is half of what I would consider to be maximally efficacious on a sporadic / intermittent time schedule. It's going to take you a lot longer to get up to that point where you would even realize these benefits. And even once you do, it's probably going to be fractional, given that it's 3,200 milligrams. Does that mean this doesn't do anything though? Does it mean it's not worth including at all? No, it can still be somewhat useful, but it's not going to be the full-blown properties you see reinforced in the literature. And again, ultimately you have to decide at the exercise type that you are doing, is it actually applicable? Are you going to eke out another additional rep in a 8 to 12 rep set or something using this stuff at the dosage burden and the ROI on the paresthesia and crackhead face itches relative to the potential eking out one more rep in a probably more so in a 2 to 3 minute exercise duration, actual exercise that entails that kind of a duration of exposure to actual full-blown effort. That is where it's going to shine. So ultimately this is a personal preference, and some people just like to feel something. So if you want to feel some shit, this ingredient will definitely do that at this dosage. The actual performance enhancing properties of it, I think, will need to be at a higher dosage burden personally, but this is seen in the industry by many to be an efficacious dose. It's not like he's underdosing it significantly. I don't see any pre-workouts that are actually hitting that 6,400 set point personally. So ultimately, you're going to need to supplement with this shit separately, regardless of which pre you're using that I've seen, if you really want to realize the full benefits and utility of it. But anyways, obviously, a very preferential ingredient based on your own individual needs, sports performance endeavors, as well as your tolerability of butthole itches. Creatine monohydrate at 3,000 milligrams. This is the tried and true format of creatine. All the other ones, frankly, a lot of them are fucking marketing hype. They try to shit on, creatine mono when it is ultimately the tried and true format that is, the most cost efficient, the most fucking useful, the most best bang for your buck. And, maybe some people might not be able to tolerate it from a, digestive standpoint at a full, 5 grams in a pre-workout. So sometimes they'll include only 3 grams, which is that why they did this in this product? I don't know for certain. Or maybe it's because they have other products that could cumulatively be stacked and they're encouraging people to get other products to reach that 5 gram kind of saturation point. Again, 3 grams is not bad. It could be totally sufficient for some individuals and actually have, all of the, benefits you're trying to get out of it could be realized at 3,000 milligrams of daily exposure for a lot of individuals. But again, are you going to be taking this on a daily basis? Probably not with the stimulants in it. Is this something that is going to fulfill your need for creatine? Maybe, depends on your body weight, methylation demands. Every individual is going to have slight genetic differences in that regard, as well as their lifestyle and sports endeavors, how fucking muscle bound they are, etc. So 3,000 milligrams, obviously you guys know my stance. I like 5 grams personally, and I think that is the best ROI given it's a pretty fucking cheap ingredient. But it's not like 3 grams is not sufficient for a lot of individuals. But ultimately you're going to need to take this separately, presumably through another product that they have, and maybe they don't want to have too significant of a creatine intake where if you're taking their, other recovery product or whatever, that it pushes you into fucking 10 gram creatine range. I'm not really sure. Anyways, but fucking highly, one of the most potent ergogenic aids in the supplement industry, very, very no-brainer thing to be using on a daily basis, creatine monohydrate. It has a lot of benefits people don't realize too. They just think it is, it just draws muscle and water into the muscle. It makes you inflated with water weight. It gives you some leverage in the gym, and it's, fake muscle. You gain a few pounds of water and that's it. It has benefits above and beyond from a 5-alpha reduction context. It may even increase DHT, which downstream does that, have some impact on your motor unit recruitment in the gym. Some of this stuff may be speculative, but it definitely does have interactions with myostatin. It also has interactions with fertility. It also has very potent interactions on muscle volume and being able to actually increase your performance metrics in the gym pretty blatantly. It seems to be one of the most obvious go-to ergogenic aids in a natural over-the-counter context. Betaine anhydrous, a osmolite that is also useful as a methyl donor and can be, it has some interesting data that may reinforce that it has some sort of effects on body composition, specifically muscle growth, but ultimately I don't defer to that literature really at all because it's, when you're looking at shit like amino acids contribution to body composition changes, as well as, an osmolite like this, a lot of that literature, I don't really buy into lean body mass changes that are that significant from things that are altering cell volume through actual water, or things that are ultimately not really facilitating muscle protein synthesis and then claiming to be anabolic in a contractile tissue accrual context. I don't really read into that much. I would be weary to make claims on a betaine regarding that. I think the main literature that I am familiar with and what I would, touch on the most is mainly its effect to balance fluid levels inside and outside of cells. Individuals that have, depending on PEMT gene variations, it can substitute for folate and B12 in the regeneration of methionine, and can be choline sparing as well, which obviously interacting with your cholinergics in certain formulas for nootropics and or in pre-workouts for acetylcholine production, motor unit recruitment downstream, obviously can be, highly useful for force production in that regard as well. But, intracellular hyperhydration is the main name of the game, in my opinion. Main name in the game, it's fucking hard to say. For betaine, improved hydration status in cells, helps your pump a little bit, helps your actual output a little bit. There is some actual literature on its effect on cardiovascular disease, digestion, liver function, performance, and a power, endurance, muscle growth, and fat loss context. There is actually a reasonable amount of literature supporting betaine in some of these actual body composition changing effects, but like I said, I don't really read into those too much, but they're worth noting nonetheless. One of the main kind of high priority ingredients in my opinion. Taurine, this is a antioxidant that's also useful for not cramping. It's something that is often found at high dosages in energy drinks, and it is a highly regarded pre-workout ingredient. Personally, I take it away from workouts on its own. I don't put it in pre-workouts myself, but it does not mean that it does not have any utility. Glycersize, glycerol powder, 65%. So this is the Glycer pump I believe I touched on at the start of the video. Also a hyperhydrating agent, which frankly is more useful in a endurance context again. However, it does not mean it does not help facilitate the pump, which ultimately helps with mind-muscle connection and frankly just makes working out more fun when you get a fucking juicy pump, obviously. L-Tyrosine, neurotransmitter precursor. And again, when we're talking about the efficacious dose for taurine, like this is reasonable. Glycer pump. Glycerol is a really has a high ceiling for its effects. Like ultimately to get the significant hyperhydration, you're gonna use a dose that is significantly exceeding what you can fit in a turnkey pre-workout. So these dosages are essentially aiding in a additive fashion to the pump, but it's not going to inherently be a efficacious dose, frankly. And this is not something you would really evaluate in a pre-workout and be like, oh, 2,000 milligrams, that's definitely enough glycerol for hyperhydration. Like it's not, to be honest, in an endurance context, which is when this shit would actually be the most highly leveraged. But in like an intramuscular, like hyperhydrating, getting a bit more swole, a few thousand milligrams, to me is like reasonable, given that otherwise, if you're trying to put in an actual full-blown fucking dose of glycerol, your product is going to be a clumpy disaster. It's not going to be something you can even fucking sell, because it's going to come in like a 5-pound protein jug. Like it's something that ultimately, if you want to get the real dose, you're going to be buying separately, to be honest. L-tyrosine, neurotransmitter, it doesn't mean it has no utility though. Be aware of what I'm saying here when I'm talking about it in this dosage context. Like ultimately you fit what you can fucking fit. Like this is almost 30 grams of actives, or 30 grams of raw powder. This is like obviously a reasonably dosed pre-workout. We have L-tyrosine, neurotransmitter precursor, that is useful for the production of adrenaline, dopamine, other things that are going to be useful in a feel-good, uplifting, motivation context, getting you in the gym, getting you some drive. It's not that stimulatory as opposed to adrenergic receptor agonists or antagonists in some contexts, or beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists, caffeine. Shit like that is going to be stimulatory, whereas L-tyrosine is not necessarily inherently highly stimulating. It is ultimately like a smooth, mood elevating ingredient that can enhance drive, stress resilience perhaps in some contexts, and ultimately motivation and whatnot. Agmatine sulfate, 1,000 milligrams. This is the kind of an interesting ingredient that I do like. It is something that can manipulate pain threshold in the gym, which may be useful for pushing through those last few reps that otherwise may be too mentally taxing for some people, or get you to another level that maybe you couldn't have realized otherwise. But also, like, mainly what it's used for is, well, I guess some people actually use it for the pain threshold thing, like prominently, but it also works through its selective inhibition of certain isoforms, leading to the production of certain nitric oxide synthase isoforms. So this would be the inducible nitric oxide synthase. This would be the neuronal nitric oxide synthase, as well as being a stimulatory, though, of enhancing endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which ultimately is going to potentiate vasodilation in like where you want it ideally, as opposed to neurologically, where you may otherwise end up with, neurotoxic outcomes from ultimately when you have nitric oxide at like excessive levels, it's not necessarily like, in certain contexts it's healthy, but then it can also be like carcinogenic and vice versa. And this is what you'll often see in, I'm not saying this is an inherently carcinogenic formula or anything like that. I'm just saying in general, there's always a trade-off when it comes to vasodilation and nitric oxide production relative to, like, there's always a trade-off from a cancer versus like a fucking like cardio health standpoint. It's kind of annoying how the human body is so paradoxical, and that's something that may be good for the heart, maybe bad for cancer, or something that's good for attenuating cancer is like bad for actual fucking, or like good for handling, attenuating the risk, or minimizing your risk of, cancer cell proliferation is ultimately going to be like anti-ergogenic in like almost all contexts, frankly. There's just like a trade-off in that regard. But this thing is ultimately going to be something that facilitates a selective expression of what you're trying to get out of a nitric oxide precursor, and it seems to be complementary to something like an L-Citrulline. So if you were using a agmatine for like, I don't know, like a neuroprotection aspect, like you're probably going to have that effect completely mitigated entirely by other NO precursors and formulas that are non-selective. But ultimately, like the main thing being used for this is the ridiculous vasodilation and pump that you're trying to get out of it, and the neuronal fucking context of it is ultimately kind of set aside for the workout window when you were trying to get massive fucking satellite cell proliferation. You're trying to get as much vasodilation, hyperhydration, performance, fucking adrenergic signaling, etc. Like none of that shit is necessarily like endearing in a health context, but ultimately this ingredient, I don't know why I went on that big fucking tangent, but I'm trying to explain what this shit even does. The endothelial nitric oxide synthase increase from this is potent and additive to the NO precursors in this formula, and I like the ingredient personally. Coconut fruit water powder, I don't know, like personally I would just have like coconut water. I don't know if I try to like fucking powderize it and put it in a pre-workout. Like I guess it could be a good like potassium source potentially. I don't know like how much this would even yield though, because it's like you're like powderizing something that ultimately, like if I'm trying to get potassium, like why I would rather just put in like a fucking decent amount of straight potassium personally. But I mean, there is, certain regulations on putting in straight potassium, so I could understand this may be like a more natural means of achieving electrolyte balance and whatnot. But ultimately, when you're sweating, like, I don't know, like personally, I would rather just mix the fucking pre-workout in coconut water or something like that. But ultimately, you have to keep in mind too, potassium isn't the only thing that you're losing when you're sweating in the gym. Like personally, I would be looking also at your broad spectrum electrolytes, looking at sodium is predominantly what is going to be lost during sweat, during exercise session, with only small amounts of potassium really being lost, calcium, magnesium, etc. So like ultimately, if you're using a coconut water, which is like very potassium rich, are you neglecting the other components of other electrolytes? Like you would, I don't know, like it's just something to consider. I'm just saying, like, I don't know if I would powderize this shit and put it in here. I don't know, like maybe it's cheap, maybe it's not that, it's a unique fucking element to it, and it's not hurting the profile necessarily, just put it that way. I just don't think it's really like that useful, probably. Alpha GPC 50%, this is the primary choline donor that I am a fan of for its ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. Its yield being 50% relative to other, choline precursors / yielding agents that are going to be far less than that and or don't produce any sort of neurological benefits whatsoever in a clinical application setting. And 400 milligrams, is that a reasonable dose? It's pretty close to the acute force production increase studies that showed a significant impact on strength in the gym essentially. And yeah, like it's not terrible, it's not a bad dose. I would like to see higher personally, but I mean, you can only do so much when you're dealing with certain margins in this industry. Like the supply chain shit is getting pretty fucking ridiculous and margins are getting worse by the day. And 400 milligrams is not a bad dose. It's not like the ideal efficacious dose, but it, additively, concurrently with everything else in the formula, it's definitely a reasonable addition. Caffeine Anhydrous, 260 milligrams. Presumably it's at 260 because the Di-Caffeine malate is 64 milligrams yielding. Oh, okay, so it's not a flat. I was expecting this to be like yielding 60 milligrams or 40 or something, so it would be like a flat 300. But no, it is 260 and 64 yielding 45 milligrams of caffeine. So we're at 305 milligrams of caffeine specifically. Interesting math on that, but Di-Caffeine malate being a like sustained bleed of caffeine more so than like an acute exposure like a caffeine anhydrous, so having more of a ratio of like longer acting caffeine relative to short acting, although not a significant dose really, to be honest. But ultimately this is a bit more of a unique kind of spin on caffeine to get more of like a long-standing effect and a more sustained drop out of your system, I guess, as well. So it's not like a big up and then like a big down. It's sort of like a more neutral up, although still pretty acute and aggressive, given that the 260 relative to the 64 with the short acting, and then you have a more, I don't know, a bit of a more tapered slope off. L-theanine, also something that's going to help with that, slope off and the, potential crash that may ensue. This is something that I believe interacts with the same receptors as glutamate, which is an excitable neurotransmitter, which ultimately by attenuating some of the overactivity of excitable neurotransmitters in the brain, you get a kind of like not a relaxation, but like a smoothing out of the stimulants in this product, and it may otherwise actually help you get to sleep easier from caffeine-induced sleep disturbances. L-theanine seems to smooth that out a little bit and help you get to sleep easier, and it is definitely a good ingredient in my opinion, and one of the tried and true nootropic stacks is indeed just caffeine plus L-theanine. It's quite useful. Bitter orange extract yielding 6% synephrine. So we have synephrine is a alpha-1 adrenergic receptor agonist, I believe, off the top of my head. So it's not the same as a ribosine or a yohimbine that are alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists. Rather, this is an alpha-1 adrenergic receptor agonist that is otherwise quite stimulatory. I believe it's even used to like avert like low blood pressure. It's like literally used to increase blood pressure, I believe. Now that class of compound specifically, I'm not saying synephrine like specifically, but it's going to be energizing. It's going to be adrenaline inducing. It is going to be something that's an additive effect to caffeine, and it is somewhat of a straight edge stimulant as far as I know, although the kind of like more aggressive variant of this through chemical modification is isopropyl-norepinephrine, which frankly, I think if you're going to be adding, like, I don't know, ultimately this is, it's individual preference, what kind of stimulants you like. But personally, from the kind of like synephrine vector side of things, I prefer isopropyl-norepinephrine for a more aggressive, acute outcome if I wanted to add something on top of the caffeine or PEAs or analogs of PEA personally. But it's not like this doesn't have utility. Some people like it, and it can be good. So, and the dosage, if you're looking at a 6% yield of synephrine, can it be this a reasonable dose when you actually break it down? Yeah, it's not like, doesn't seem to be crazy high. If I'm reading this yield correctly, then yeah, it seems to be a low enough dosage that it's not going to be overly stimulating above and beyond the caffeine burden. Di-Caffeine malate, we already touched on that. Estrogen, this is the astragalus and Panax ginseng combo that is basically used to enhance absorption of different like amino acids and shit. Is this going to be useful for enhancing your 3,000 milligrams of creatine, your citrulline? Maybe. You could ultimately make an argument that they're more efficacious with this concurrently in your formula. However, the utility of like when I break down 25 milligrams of astragalus, given that for support of my kidneys, I use like thousands of milligrams of this shit. Like, I am very, very skeptical that a fucking small fraction of the shit is going to be significantly useful in upregulating, like NO precursors and shit. So like, I don't know how much weight I really hold in this ingredient, although it does have some, therapeutic promise, and some individuals, like really, really like it or hype it up. So, it could be a useful addition that ultimately makes this a more cost-effective way to administer like a higher dose without actually having to put the higher dose in there, if that makes sense. But personally, like, I would just use astragalus and ginseng if you're trying to get these ingredients separately at efficacious dosages is what I have been doing. Maybe I'll change my mind in the future, but I mean, like, I use fucking thousands of milligrams of astragalus on a daily basis already, and these are extracts, and ginseng can be useful in some contexts too, above and beyond just bioavailability enhancement. But yeah, is ultimately what that would be used for, presumably. I can't imagine it would be in here for any other reason. Huperazine a pretty highly leveraged acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, so this is something that's going to prevent the breakdown of acetylcholine rather than being a precursor in the body. So this is ultimately hitting like I don't know, there's like the degradation angle of your acetylcholine versus the actual, like choline component of your diet and supplementation that is assisting in the production of enough acetylcholine. So you're sort of preventing I don't know if it's like it's not like preventing the candle from burning from both ends. I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like a good way to elaborate on this, but like you have an adequate amount of choline, ideally through your diet and or supplementation concurrently, which then is going to enable you to produce enough acetylcholine. Obviously you have, like methyl donors as well. through this betaine anhydrous, as well as relieving the methylation burden off your body a bit, especially if you're an individual with MTHFR polymorphisms with creatine as well. And then you have this acetylcholinesterase inhibitor component that is ultimately helping avoid the degradation of acetylcholine. So ultimately this is going to yield more, like it's a nootropic ingredient that is going to aid in the cognitive enhancement component of this product and prevent as quick of degradation of the thing that is ultimately going to facilitate muscular contractions and help you recruit motor units in the gym. So this is a good ingredient in my opinion. The dosage deployed, like I've seen in the literature supporting much higher dosages than this. And I prefer a higher dose, but you have to keep in mind this is also cumulatively with their alpha GPC, with their creatine, with their fucking betaine, all this shit in unison with one another. You don't necessarily need the maxed out dose to yield a efficacious outcome. So it's not like this does not work at this dose. Like this is a reasonable dose, frankly, with the other ingredients present. And I think overall this formula is like fucking like reasonably well thought out, hits a lot of different vectors of performance. And you know, it's not bad. You know, it's definitely a decent formula, but ultimately it doesn't sound like this is gonna be the formula at all. So I guess we shall see what happens in the future with the formula, but that is my breakdown of it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. All the comments help the algorithm. Much appreciated. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplacemordates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplacemordates. Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My HRT clinic, it's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. Get high quality medical oversight from doctors who actually understand what kind of diagnostics and biomarkers you should be getting checked and how to interpret those and create an individualized protocol just for you based on your own individual imbalances or deficiencies. And it does not just resort to haphazard cookie cutter protocols with pharmacology. Rather, we actually do preventative medicine and high quality diagnostics. And I highly encourage you to get a high caliber doctor in your camp if you do not have one, especially for bodybuilders who are saucing to the tits, stressing the fuck out of their cardiovascular systems, their brain, their kidneys, their liver, etc. It's absolutely critical you get a doctor in your camp who actually understands preventative medicine and how to attenuate the stress and damage that you are otherwise inducing on yourself with exposure to these super physiologic amounts of androgens, and how to attenuate it with ancillaries, lifestyle changes, etc. It's not just about, you know, blood pressure modulation, which is ultimately, you know, like something even overlooked by a lot of bodybuilders, which is basic as fuck, but other things that often go overlooked and frankly, I think are taking decades off of guys' lives that may be more easily attenuated. Should they have had proper medical oversight from day one and people advising them on what to be doing, what kind of diagnostics they should be getting from the get-go. But as well, we also deal with naturals, not just guys who are saucing to the tits. I'm just, you know, figured this is a video about one of the best bodybuilders in the world, so I might as well touch on that component. But we do, we're broad spectrum, we're turnkey, we help naturals too, those who are looking for in maximizing their vitality, quality of life, just want to see what's under the hood and make sure everything is functioning at top tilt, and otherwise figure out how to optimize their current state of health. We do it all, so check it out. It's in the video description below. As well, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas, I designed myself from scratch and a recommended diet model for gaining muscle and sports performance, whilst being mindful of things like electrolyte balance, thyroid function, micronutrient density of your foods, things that are often overlooked by cookie cutter influencer diets sold on Instagram. And anything else that I'm associated with, the clothing company that sponsors me, anything else, it is all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.